Today, the 26th November is celebrated as the Constitution Day in the entire country. On this date, in the year 1949, we gave ourselves the Constitution. The Constitution was drafted by the members of Constituent Assembly. The Constitution is called Supreme Law of Land, from where Constitution derived its power. From where we get this spirit of constitutionalism in ourselves. From what point of view we regard Constitution as the supreme law of land or as the supreme authority. So we are going to discuss that in today's discussion. So without making any further delay, let's start our discussion for the day. These are the lines from the preamble of the Constitution. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India as into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, and all these things. So these are the lines which we get in our civics book when we are in our schools. So from where these lines came, we have to discuss that today also. So there are few defining dates in our country's democratic journey, and 26th November is one of them. As I have already remarked, that on this day, 1949, Constituent Assembly adopted our Constitution after extensive deliberations. Following a suggestion by six-time Lok Sabha MP Mr. Mehtab in 2015, the government started celebrating this day as Constitution Day to promote constitutional values among the citizens of this country. That year 2015 also marked the 125th birth anniversary of B.R. Ambedkar, the architect of the Constitution of India. So the story of our constitution making is also different and unique in its characteristics. The draft constitution prepared by the committee headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has thoroughly discussed in the Constituent Assembly. Its members suggested 7,635 amendments, of which 2,473 were discussed during a period. Now come to the story of calligraphy. You all know the calligraphy of our constitution were done by none other than Nandalal Bose. So in October 1949, Dr. Rajendra Prasad approached eminent artist Nandalal Bose to decorate the pages of calligraphed constitution. Calligraphy was not done by him. The decoration after doing the calligraphy was done by this eminent personality. The illuminated manuscript would be treasured by the nation and by the future generations as the monument not only of our political and intellectual labors but also of the nation's artistic achievements. And roughly 2 weeks before the adoption of the Constitution, the Constituent Assembly Secretariat engaged the services of expert calligrapher Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada to write every article of the Constitution. Raizada started writing the text of Constitution House, a barracks Constitution House, a barracks complex built during the Second World War to house US troops stationed in Delhi. The Secretariat then transported the calligraphed pages in batches from Delhi to Santiniketan for the decoration done by Nandalal and his team. Nandalal Bose and his team. The artist decorated the beginning of each chapter with an illustration. For example, Mohenjo-daro seal before part 1. Okay, in the starting of part 1, that is the Union and its territory, conquest of Lanka, Krishna propounding Gita, Dandi March, and every page with a border. Look at the decoration at the border. Okay, these all were done by Nandalal Bose and his team at Santiniketan. Okay, which is now a UNESCO World Heritage City or World Heritage Site, you may say. The completed pages then returned to Delhi. The intensive work, the tight timeline, and the back and forth meant that when the time came to sign the written copy of the Constitution, it was incomplete. On January 24, 1950, an eager Constituent Assembly members lined up to sign the written copy of the Constitution. Then only 100 pages had been calligraphed, not all the pages. A decision was made to have the pages at the end calligraphed and take member signature on the continuation sheets. Okay. Now, when Dr. Rajendra Prasad decided to have the Constitution handwritten, he also proposed that 1,000 copies of the English and Hindi versions would be printed. 1,000 copies of the Constitution of India to be printed. Ramanath Goenka, a Constituent Assembly member, had offered to pay for the printing of the Constitution. He stated in a letter, if you desire that 1,000 copies of the Constitution should be printed and given free to the government of India, it can be easily arranged. While the offer was not taken up, the financial outlay regarding preparing the written Constitution established the principle of parliamentary independence. Okay. The calligrapher and the artists had material costs. They are also paid as an honorarium rupees 1,500 to the calligrapher and on a per page or per illustration basis to the artist. There was also the cost associated with printing and binding. These expenditure proposals were in the Parliament Secretariat's budget and were to be placed before the Standing Finance Committee. Speaker G.V. Mavalankar believed that placing any matter related to Parliament Secretariat before a panel for approval would be a bad precedent and constitutionally wrong. Okay. Now look at this page. This is the beginning of part 4, that is directive principle of the state policy. Okay, look at the decoration. Now come to the moment of adoption of the Constitution. On November 26, 1949, when the Constitution was being adopted, Dr. Rajendra Prasad said, a constitution like a machine is a lifeless thing. It acquires life because of the men who control it and operate it. There is fissiparous tendency arising out of various elements in our life. We have communal differences, caste differences, language differences, provincial differences, and so forth. It requires men of strong character, men of vision, men who will not sacrifice the interests of the country at large for the sake of the smaller groups and areas, and who will rise over the prejudices which are born of these differences. So these are the words of Dr. Rajendra Prasad at the moment of the adoption of our constitution. Now come to the statement from Ambedkar. We must not forget that the constitution is for the people of India and it is for the ordinary people only. We must see that the constitution is not only passed by the mere constituent assembly, but that it is also worked by the common people of the country. These words underscore the foundational principle that the constitution hold, and its accompanying legal language should be comprehensible to every citizen irrespective of their legal expertise. Though many people criticize the constitution as the lawyer's paradise for being its complexity, for being its lengthy nature, okay, but it should be comprehensible to every Indian, okay, as the citizen of this country, because it is for the citizen of this country the constitution had been drafted. One of the important criticisms about the present constitution is that it was a colonial constitution. This is also one kind of criticism apart from lawyer's paradise, which oftentimes comes up in the criticism of this constitution. It is argued that a large part of it was copy-paste from the Government of India Act 1935 enacted by the British Parliament. So our constitution is inspired from multiple sources. It is not only from the Government of India Act 35. It is not the copy-paste of Government of India Act of 1935. It is also drawn from the US Constitution. It has also been inspired from the South African Constitution, Japanese Constitution, Irish Constitution, UK Constitution, and also the USSR Constitution. So we have drawn our inspirations for drafting constitution from multiple sources. So this is not true of putting an objection like that it is only a copy paste from the Government of India Act of 1935. While there is no denying of the fact that 1935 Act was a colonial enterprise to perpetuate the British stranglehold over our country, and there were some similarities. There were some similarities in the clauses of the 1935 Government of India Act and of the Constitution. The colonial tag may be an oversimplification as well. Okay, so I'll come to that discussion now. Allaying such apprehensions, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, in his final address on November 26, 1949, as the chairman of the Constituent Assembly, made an important assertion that they were not bound to have a constitution which completely and fully falls in the line with known categories of the constitution in the world. Dr. Rajendra Prasad insisted that the constitution has not to an inconsiderable extent been influenced by such realities as the facts of history of our country. So, one such fact of history was the visit of Simon Commission in 1927. You all know that protesting from Indian national leaders, that Simon go back with black flag, with the mandate of reviewing the working of the Government of India Act 1919, which was the objective of Simon Commission to come in India and proposing the constitutional reforms of the country. The Indian National Congress decided to boycott. So I have already mentioned that our national leaders boycotted that Simon Commission on the grounds that there was not a single Indian member in it. The British thought that Indians were incompatible, or they are not able to draft a constitution for themselves, for the Indians themselves. Instead of accepting the mistake, the British sought to challenge Indians to prove that they could draw up a constitution by their own. A similar challenge was thrown by Lord Birkenhead, the Secretary of State for India, in the House of Lords in 1925, calling Indians to produce a constitution. They challenged Indians, which carries behind it a fair measure of general agreement among the great peoples of India. So, Lord Birkenhead challenged the Indian national leaders to produce a constitution for themselves, even which had the agreement, general agreement among the peoples of India. So this is how British challenged us, and how our leaders replied them. Leaders of nationalist movement accepted the challenge by setting up an all-party conference in December 1927 to draft a constitution for India. And who were the members of that committee? Motilal Nehru led it, with Subhash Chandra Bose, Annie Besant, M.R. Jayakar, Jawaharlal Nehru, a couple of Muslim League representatives and others as its members. It came out with a draft constitution in 1928 that became popular as the Nehru Report. And remember, the Nehru Report named after Motilal Nehru. Unfortunately, political consensus eluded the Nehru Report at that time. It nevertheless became the basis of the future constitutional struggle. It contained 22 chapters, 88 articles, and dealt with important subjects like fundamental rights, bicameral parliament, divisions of powers, judicial independence, and center-state relations. It unequivocally declared that every citizen of 21 years of age shall have the voting rights. So it had also declared the universal adult franchise for the age of more than 21 years or equal to 21 years. A leading newspaper exclaimed in its editorial, while Birkenhead got a befitting reply, we have drawn the Magna Carta of our liberty. Okay. So, in reality, the Government of India Act 1935 was a hurried British response to the growing demand for liberty centered around the Nehru Report. It is a hurried British response. While allowing limited democracy, it enhanced the powers of viceroys, including the power to dissolve the parliament, prompting Congress to call it a slave constitution. Okay, far from being universal, voting rights were extended to less than 15% of the total population. There was no provision for rights of all. Upon dispassionate analysis, the Indian Constitution seems more akin to Nehru Report than 1935 Act. It is in the roller coaster of Indian politics. In the last 7 decades, it served the country efficiently. It failed when leaders failed it. Okay. Now, come to the statement that our constitution only belongs to us and not to the British because of their Government of India 1935 Act. Rohit De, a legal historian, also writes of another instance of this sort of constitutional development that drew from resolution of fundamental rights and economic changes at the Karachi session of the Congress in 1931, of which Pandit Nehru, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Subhash Chandra Bose were also members. The resolution argues that in order to end exploitation of the masses, political freedom must include economic freedom. The Karachi resolution argues that, along with fundamental rights, it provided for ending of bonded and child labor, free primary education, expansion of labor welfare, regime protection labor unions, women workers, providing for redistribution of resources through state control over key industries and national resources, recognizing the communal problem and laying to protection of minority rights. All these demands should find their way into part 3 and part 4 of the Constitution, that is fundamental rights and directive principle of the state policy. Importantly, Rothmund and they, that is Rohit, they demonstrate that through their works that our constitution is not just a reproduction of Government of India Act of 1935. So this is a wrong argument. Okay. Next, Hannah Lerner writes that the framers appreciated the link between consensus in adoption and the legitimacy of the constitution. So our constitution is a legitimate authority or legitimate source of power. Okay. For instance, when debating the adoption of Hindi as a national language, Rajendra Prasad, President of Constituent Assembly, said that the choice of national language would have to be carried out by the whole country, and that even if a majority of the assembly made a choice that was not approved by a section of the people, then implementation of the constitution would be rendered perilous. Hence, Hindi was made the official language only of the Union, while English was retained to be used for all official purpose. Okay. Yet, while drafters opted for compromise and consensus in some areas, they made bold choices also on others. For instance, breaking down traditional privileges like the abolition of princely states and their royal titles, and crafting the country as democracy based on universal adult franchise, and ending discrimination on the grounds of caste, sex, and all these things, race, religion. India's drafters and their methodologies to craft the glorious product hold lessons for contemporary politicians and lawmakers. Consensus, craft, and vision are invaluable while making an instrument to endure. And all these were among the constituent members of Constituent Assembly. Happy Constitution Day to all of us, dear readers of my slides and dear viewers also. Cherish our founding document, for it is truly rare, and do not take the endurance of it or taken as a granted. But I am not ending here, so let's discuss a little bit more. So there is also a debate that do we need to rewrite the constitution? Is there any need to rewrite the constitution? Look at the example of France. France has had over a dozen constitutions between 1791 and 1958. The last one credited with creating the Fifth Republic. In our neighborhood, country like Nepal had 6 constitutions between 1948 and 2007 before finally settling for the present one in 2015. Chile in South America embarked on rewriting its constitution in 2021, while the president of Uzbekistan secured a thumbs up for the same or for the rewriting of the constitution in a referendum just a few months ago. But none of these countries is comparable to India. Political expediency or lack of consensus over principles were largely responsible for them to undertake such exercise. We may say that. So, do we need to rewrite the constitution? I think no. But why not? Look, many major countries, including US, run their affairs without even tampering with their constitutions too much. Several, like the UK and Israel, run their countries even when they don't have a written constitution. Number two, while responding to Birkenhead's challenge, we accepted its underlying principle, a constitution that carries behind it a fair measure of general agreement among the peoples of India. We must be prepared for such a gigantic exercise, not forgetting that the present constitution was drafted without taking recourse to voting and divisions in lobbies. So it is a proud moment of India which we should protect. So now I am concluding my discussion with this quote of Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Our constitution has provisions in it which appear to some to be objectionable from one point or another. It may be objectionable. If the people who are elected are capable and men of proper or true character and integrity, they would be able to make the best even of a defective constitution. So it depends on the quality of those people who are in the ruling community or who are the rulers of the country. If they are lacking in this, means if they are lacking in their character, integrity and all these things, the constitution, the best constitution also cannot help the country. So here I am ending my discussion. Happy Constitution Day again to all of you. Take care of yourself. Take care of your mental and physical health. Bye bye.